Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. Today we're diving deeper into a story you may have seen on WRAL last month. A Chapel Hill towing company is under pressure over what some drivers call predatory practices. WRAL Investigates Sarah Kruger took a closer look at the complaints filed about Barnes Towing at the local and state level. Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's take a step back. How did you first hear about Barnes Towing?
So we heard from a lot of our viewers around the end of last year asking us to look into a situation they believed was predatory towing at the Car Mill Mall in downtown Carborough.
I had never left the property whatsoever.
And he showed you a picture. It wasn't you.
It was not me. It was a woman who had the same color shirt on that I did.
My car was stolen. He prefers the word towing.
And Barnes Towing, they are the ones who do the towing from that lot. So we did that original story about hundreds of people being towed from Carmill Mall. That story was in December, and then we just got even more calls and emails asking us to investigate other aspects of how Barnes Towing and towing companies in general operate.
And since December, what complaints have you been looking into?
So I filed a lot of records requests with the towns of Chapel Hill and Carborough and with the State Attorney General's office. And that way I was able to see the formal complaints that had been filed against the company, of which there were dozens. And the complaints varied, including someone who said she did not get a receipt after her car was towed and she paid in cash.
The lady on the phone who answers the phone for Barnes Towing said that it would be cash only.
And also complaints just about the volume of tows and the speed at which they happen. People felt that was predatory in nature. And this is locations beyond just Carmill Mall that we're talking about. This is also on Franklin Street, for example, in Chapel Hill. And then a big complaint we heard and that I read over and over in reading these complaints is about a credit card surcharge. So people being told, and the signs also acknowledging, that paying by credit card to Barnes Towing is going to cost you more.
They charged $100 extra for the credit card, which is the part that upsets me quite a bit. The towing company has you by the neck and you just have to pay whatever they want to charge you.
And how is the towing company able to charge fees like that for accepting credit cards?
The towing industry in North Carolina is really not that regulated. Towns and cities here in our state used to have more power to set rules on towing within their jurisdictions, and then that was struck down by a North Carolina Supreme Court ruling about a decade ago. So now there is no cap in the state on what towing companies can charge, period, nor on what they can charge in terms of a credit card fee. So the towns can require, though, that a company be required to accept card, which Carborough and Chapel Hill both do. And interestingly, the Public Interest Research Group did some studies on this, did some research, and they say nationwide it's about 50-50 that half the states have rules to regulate towing charges, like Virginia, which sets a cap at $150, and only 12 have state laws requiring towing companies to accept credit cards.
Gotcha. And of course, no one likes being towed. But how common is it for people to end up in a situation where they're being towed by Barnes Towing?
So in Chapel Hill and Carborough, it's pretty common, if you are towed, that likely it was by Barnes. So what I found through a records request is that there were about 450 cars towed in Carborough last year, and 87% of those tows were done by Barnes Towing. And then looking in Chapel Hill, there were 1,811 tows last year. 74% of those were by Barnes. So far and away, they are accounting for more tows than anyone else in those two jurisdictions.
And how many of these complaints that have made it to the state level?
So we looked at state and local being Carborough and Chapel Hill. And when we're looking at all of those, there were about 50 in 2023. And in these complaints, people will write a narrative about what happened. And some of them really stood out, like a family who says they were in the area in Carborough near Carmill Mall taking their son to cancer treatment is what brought them to this
wow.
area. And then their car was towed by Barnes, and inside of the car were his medications, his wheelchair. So it was a huge burden on this family that didn't realize they had parked in the wrong spot. And that was a common theme, really, is people saying like they didn't see the signs, or they didn't really understand the boundaries of where they were parking and what parking lot included which businesses, especially for people, I'm sure, if they were out of town.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Sarah, what did you find out when you reached out to the state attorney general's office about these complaints?
So I talked to Attorney General Josh Stein himself, and he said his office hears from a lot of people wanting stricter towing regulations.
To the extent there are folks out there who believe that towing regulations should be tougher, I'm one of those people. It's on the legislature to empower local governments to better protect their residents.
So they would have to take action to either add more state regulations or empower local governments to be able to do more.
And through all of this reporting that you've been doing and calls and documents you've been getting, have you heard anything from Barnes Towing?
I have. So I got an email from them responding to the specific allegations that we heard. So generally they said, they follow all state laws and local ordinances. That was one part of their statement. And as far as charging more for paying by credit card, they said rather than calling that a credit card surcharge, they believe that's a cash discount. And they said that was something they have because of requests from people that they have towed, and so that's why they have that. And in terms of the woman who said she paid in cash, got no receipt, the email from the representative basically said they have a system to send a text receipt to everyone, and it's a process that allows them to verify that that is done. Now, in terms of why they have towed so many more cars than other companies looking at Carborough and Chapel Hill, they said they're doing their job, that they're contacted by private property owners to tow, and that they are doing that, and that these management companies or these property owners want those tows because people parking there who aren't patronizing those businesses are negatively impacting their bottom lines.
Okay, and with that in mind, where can these people making these complaints go from here?
So I know the Attorney General's office tries to work with the person who is making the complaint and with the company to try to find a resolution between the two parties. And I know what I was seeing sometimes in the complaints and the communication from the AG's office is that there were times when one of the parties would not respond and wouldn't carry it out. So a lot of times it seems like those complaints ultimately went nowhere, and I'm sure it can be, a lot of time that's lapsing, and it may, people may find that they filed a complaint, but then a few weeks later, they sort of get over it and decide it's not worth their time. That's just sort of one guess maybe about why a party may not continue to respond.
And for people who are listening, of course, as we talked about, everybody wants to avoid getting towed if they can. What steps can people make, or what do they need to know if they're going to be in Carborough or Chapel Hill to avoid getting towed?
Yeah, so talking with several of these people who have been towed, some takeaways I have from them: pay close attention to the signs and know that the possibility of being towed is a very real one. A lot of the people I spoke with and a lot of the complainants didn't see the signs. It was dark, or they felt like they weren't that visible. So just really being very cognizant to, when you pull into a parking lot, be very aware to look all around you for those signs. And also, some were saying they didn't really understand the boundaries of what businesses worked with certain lots. So just verifying things like that would be important. And just be extra careful. Make sure you're looking all around you, because really once you have already been towed, in a lot of ways, it's too late. I suppose there's some chance of you getting your money back, but it's not a good chance from what we're seeing. And of course, you're going to lose a lot of your time too in, taking an Uber or however you're going to get to your towed car. So just a nightmare, and something that we would all love to avoid, being towed.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me today, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.